In the Name of Overhead Athletics podcast, where we cover rehabilitation, biomechanics, human movement, and optimizing human performance. Welcome back to the pod. Today we're joined by Martijn Nijhoff, who's actually one of the foremost experts in skill acquisition. He's at Dutch Baseball, and he's done some really innovative and interesting things that we're hoping to cover here on the pod, talking about how we can actually program some of the things we're doing with skill acquisition into a full calendar year and over the course of long-term development for athletes. And then what we can start to do to actually alter athletes' movement, alter their movement sequences, throwing mechanics, without having any detriment to performance in the long term, especially as we talk about in-season programming with athletes having to focus on performance and being able to improve over the course of their career. Because a lot of athletes, as we know, are always in season with college ball, you have fall ball, then you're going into winter season where you're trying to prove yourself. So welcome to the podcast here. Maybe you could give a little bit of your background on how you got to the point you're at and your playing experience in Dutch Major League.
First of all, Max, thank you for having me on the podcast. I started playing baseball when I was 7, was pretty good at it. So went through national youth teams. That happens quite fast in Holland because we don't have a lot of people playing, of course. So did some traveling, went to European Championships and World Cups. And at some point I got a scholarship in Lindenwood University in St. Charles, Missouri, next to St. Louis. I had a big dream, become a professional baseball player, but did a year of that, and I saw that there were a lot of people like me, had some talent, but not enough. So I went home and finished my PE degree, and I just played in Holland in the Dutch Major League, and was a PE teacher. And then Robert Eenhoorn, I don't know if you heard of him, he played for the Yankees. He's now the director of one of the biggest soccer clubs in Holland.
Okay.
Came back and started a academy himself, the first one in Holland, called the Unicorns, and it's a translation of an eenhoorn in Dutch. So I started working for him because I was a PE teacher and I know something of training. So while doing that, somebody called me up of the university that I worked at or I studied at, and he said, "You got to talk to this guy." And I'm like, okay. So I go there and explain this guy baseball. And I had the Right View Pro program. I don't know if you know it, but it has an analysis program where you tape a guy and you load him up in the computer, and then you have all the major league hitters and pitchers in there. So you compare it to him. And then, so I was talking to this guy, and then he took over the conversation. And 2 hours later, with my jaw here, I got to start all over again. And this guy was Frans Bosch. And then, he opened the rabbit hole. So what I did is I started studying and applying these things into practice at that academy and at another academy. And Frans kind of took me under his wing, and he still does, by the way. So, and then during those years, they asked me to become the director of talent development in Holland, because we were doing stuff differently, and I got noticed by doing that. And at the same time, Paul Venner and Bart Hanegraaf, these guys also studied on the front, and they're good friends of mine. So it was a coincidence that everybody got together and working together and having Frans as a mentor. And that's how everything changed. So I had a small playing career, started as a normal trainer coach like everybody else, and then met this awesome guy that totally changed my world and the baseball talent development program in Holland.
How did that look? Because I know Frans isn't from the baseball background. That's not what he grew up doing as a sport. So how did that kind of look for you?
Well, what he was saying, so he was an artist, and so he was a painter, but he also studied PE when he was young, right? And he's like 63 or whatever right now. But he started going into painting like the old masters were doing. But for that, he had to study anatomy. And then there were some guys from the medical university asked him to do all these drawings for medical journals. So he really started understanding how the body, but not only the body, but also like horses and stuff, how their muscles and how their joints, but also even the central nervous system and what would innervate a muscle, which nerve. So, and he started basically in every movement at some point logically thinking about what was happening and how that should be fixed. And so it doesn't matter if it's baseball or soccer or sprinting. He follows the same steps, and then he comes to all these conclusions that nobody else does. And it's all very logical.
Yeah, it is logical. The one interesting thing for me, being in the United States and going through a lot of this, is in university, you don't necessarily learn, I guess in certain ways you learn some of the basics here, but then it's like a whole different realm of application, and then even a whole different realm of science that's completely beyond what you learn in the university over here. And then what's been interesting for me, being from the United States and being specifically in the Midwest of the United States, is reading Frans's work and reading some of your stuff online. There's almost a different, especially it's obviously been translated, but there's always like something interesting in the way things are written out. And I don't know if phraseology is the word, but the way sentences are put together, which also, I don't know if it makes it a better learning experience, maybe because you have to like focus on each individual component and really try to think about it. Whereas you could read through a book and just graze through it. So it's been interesting for me in that respect. But the thing I really want to get to here with you is we're talking about throwing, which is different than like a lot of these other athletic movements, in that there's at times risk associated, especially when you're dealing with arm pain and athletes who have had some degree of structural damage. And you have to kind of balance at times pathology and anatomy with your motor learning application. So how could you go about, or how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so well, we kind of do that by so we have meetings where our physical therapists, our strength trainers, and the skill trainers are all together, and they make up a plan. So let's say if you have a shot putter, right, he uses his arm, and I'm sure you've read this in the book. It's extension and flexion, it's force production, and it looks like kind of a bench press, right? So what they do in the gym kind of resembles the thing that they do in skill in the shot putting. While when you're throwing, it's a phase transition from doing this to total elasticity in the arm, where you use co-contractions to add energy to use it in an elastic way. So what we do in the gym is also exercises like that. So we kind of build a very strong arm. For example, you can do the rotator cuff exercises, but we like to use the shoulder sphere because it resembles way more the movement of the arm, like it's been done in the skill, in throwing itself. So by training the body or the muscles in the gym the same way as they're being used in the skill, this will help to have a robust system and a very strong arm that can resist a lot of load.
Specificity is king, right? When we talk about transfer to sport, we look at some of these different muscles, we look at how they act, and you're talking about phase transitions and going from maybe like a eccentric to concentric action over to an isometric or kind of pseudo isometric contraction with elastic action of the serial ends. there's always like a discussion of, okay, how do certain muscles contract and how do other muscles contract? And then you have like this almost like you're trying to figure out, okay, well, if I do things as specific as I possibly can to the actual sport, maybe it doesn't matter so much all the time. But when we look at the rotator cuff, what are your thoughts? Because I'm looking at the rotator cuff and I'm looking at the architecture of the rotator cuff, and then I'm looking at, the length of the muscles compared to the length of, the tendinous structure. And it seems to me like subscapularis and some of these other rotator cuff muscles may do better with some sort of stretch shortening cycle. Whereas we look at the lats and you're definitely thinking, okay, the lat spans this huge distance, long tendinous structures. We're definitely thinking more of an isometric elastic action. How do you kind of, from your perspective, how do you make sense of that? And then how would you implement that into what you're doing with guys in terms of application?
Yeah, it's a very good and deep question. So we always have the discussion because we think we know a lot, and then the physical therapists think they know a lot, and then there's some fights in the room about how to train this, and then we what we kind of do is we look. So you have contextual, and then you have intramuscular, so how they work together, and then you have the muscle itself, and you can make the muscle. So we're not, and I'm not saying that we're not doing eccentric, eccentric, pushing and pulling exercise, make the muscle stronger, doing hypertrophy training. We actually do that, but that's not the only thing we do. We have parts in our program, and that's kind of different than it's here, because we don't have competition from October, November, December, January, February, March. So like for 6 months, we do not have a competition. So in those first 3-4 months of no competition, we actually do lift. But we're not only lifting, we're also doing the coordination exercises. Right. And then it gradually, it starts to shift when we pass New Year. Then it's more of coordination, and we do some lifting or some eccentric, eccentric work, but more the other stuff. So the rotator cuff, we make it strong, and then we try to after it's been strong, we try to train it the other way as well.
And I'm sure you've talked to Randy Sullivan a little bit about this. With our season being different, and you kind of have what I would say is an advantage potentially on us, where we're with athletes, and a lot of these athletes are constantly in season, and there's always been a pushback from the strength and conditioning community. It's like, we need these guys to have an off season so they can develop. If you're in our scenario, how do you go about, like, hey, these guys are going to play high school baseball or college baseball, then they're going to play summer, and then they got a fall season, and then now they're really only off for maybe like part of October, but really November, December, and then January, and then in February they're picking back up. So we got like 3 months that's technically our off season. Yeah. And then guys are like in competition mode all the time.
Yeah. So what we do in competition is, so those 3 months, I would try to make gains in the gym, right? Also with the recovery time, that's perfect, because if you do some other lifting or some heavy lifting, you need 24 to 48 hours recovery. What we do in the when they start going into the season is that we with us, they play on Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So on the Monday we do some lifting, but the other days we just do the coordination stuff. And the advantage of the coordination training is that the recovery time is very low. It's between 15 minutes and maybe 6 hours, depending on how crazy you go about it. But it's more about training the signal going into the muscle instead of the muscle itself, or the firing of it. So doing the coordination part, it's lower weights, it's in more planes, it's coordination of different body parts by transferring energy through the system, and it's quick. Not only quick as in we don't do it for 90 minutes. Yes, we do it quick, maybe only 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but it's also a quick movement, which stimulates the nervous system, which makes it that it's the recovery time is low. So you would still be able to do both. Just maintain the strength by doing this once a week, because if you do it once a week, you maintain your strength, and then you get more strength those 3 months, and then during the season, do more coordination stuff, which is very good anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, guys here, guys will come in, they've done a lot of strength and conditioning, and then doing a lot of the coordination stuff. They can't believe how challenging and difficult it can be. They're like a college guy. They're strong, a little cocky. They get in there with like the smallest, aqua ball, and then they're like falling all over the place. So it's always interesting how difficult it is for a lot of these guys. And will you, in season, are you programming some of that stuff like the day before, or are you doing it, hey, like you're going to pitch on a Saturday, like we're going to take Friday off, or what are you doing in terms of in season in that respect?
Like to have a day off, or what's exactly
so like say you're going to pitch a guy on Saturday.
Oh yeah.
What's your like Friday routine for the average guy?
They're off. Yeah. Oh, and if they're not off, it's just really, really like a primer, like stimulate the nervous system, really short, effective, and then done.
Gotcha. I know Randy's like talked a lot about, and Frans talks quite a bit about it, is improving like movement overall that then can be transferred into skill specific events. So improving the ability to contract through the core, improving the ability to create force closure, and those sorts of things. And then athletes can take that into the throw. I guess when you look at what you're doing with altering throwing mechanics, are you spending majority of your time on actually training what many might call athleticism, or are you actually saying, hey, here's one component, let's get into the throw, and then here's some other very specific things to throwing?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly how our winter program looks, because I think that's where we make the biggest gain. So
absolutely
on Monday morning, they have sport-specific training. On Monday afternoon, and then they go to school. And then Monday afternoon, they lift. They have weight training. Tuesday morning, they got alternative training. Tuesday afternoon, they have sport-specific training. Wednesday morning, they have sport-specific training. Wednesday afternoon, they have strength and conditioning again. Thursday morning, they have alternative training. Thursday afternoon, they have sport-specific training, and then Friday morning, they have strength and conditioning again. So it's 9 practices, 3 are strength and conditioning, 4 are sport-specific, and 2 are alternative training. Now, these alternative trainings, they are, like we call them, donor sports. What we do there is, like, if you look at interceptive timing tasks for position players, like they have to hit a ball. So anything like with ping pong or table tennis or squash or badminton or stuff like that. We do some basketball for agility and throwing. We do some handball. But it's also just doing some other sports for these kids. It's fun. You see different reactions. You see, how they act in a different environment. Sometimes they give up really quick. You can have a discussion about that. Sometimes they cheat. Something like all these things you see, and they're all beneficial. We do gymnastics. You've probably seen some stuff about that as well. It's coordination.
Yep.
You can see it as a strength and conditioning alternative training. So yeah, we do stuff like that. But the biggest thing that we do is we do an analysis, and the analysis is based upon attractors. And the attractors are, we got the load, we got the front foot placement and stability, we got the kinetic change, so hip comes first. We have the deceleration part, we have the arm, the front arm, how it works, and we have, of course, the arm action up to release. And what we do in the gym and what we do in the sport-specific training is after we've done the analysis and we say, hey, this guy has a loading problem because he's collapsing through his knee or he's not really hinging into his back hip. We do in the gym, we do strength and conditioning practice or exercises that he needs to do because he needs to get a better load. And we do in the sport-specific training a lot of variations on how you can load in an exercise. Because when you get all these variations, but it's the same problem, you learn how to solve the problem instead of solving one trick. And we do this cycle every 6 weeks of doing a new analysis and see where they are. And then we get this kid after we done the analysis and we work together with all the professionals. We have a talk with the kid. He has to make his own personal development plan, but we give him a lot of input. So when he goes to the gym, he knows he needs to work on the load. And when he goes into the sport-specific training, he knows he needs to work on the load. He is the owner of the program. So every 6 weeks we have these talks. Every 6 weeks we have these analyses, and every 6 weeks they have a new program. And so if you look at the strength and conditioning, they have to do a baseline program based upon pitching or position player specific or whatever. But on top of that, they have room to focus on these areas where they need improvement.
I like that you said they own the program. I'm guessing at Dutch baseball, where you're at now, you're dealing with a lot of kids who are, self-motivated, and you're there as the guide to them. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, but still they're in puberty. So, but if they choose for this program, they know they have a chance of signing a professional contract or at least getting a full ride at a college. So, and before they come into our program, because it's an Olympic program, it's funded by our Olympic Committee, we have talks with them, of course, about their motivation. So it's not that they just sign up and show up. So I'm a luxury position because when they're not, putting an effort in them, I'm just like, okay, well, what are we doing here? Is this what you want? Because you've taken up a spot of somebody else. And it's not like after a week we throw them out, but sometimes we have some talks with some players about that they have to, get rid of the slack and put some more effort in it.
It's crazy to me because America's pastime is supposed to be baseball. And I don't think we have anything in the United States that remotely resembles what you guys are doing over there. Are you aware of anything?
Well, I've been to Vanderbilt for 10 days, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when Derek Johnson was still the pitching coach there. Mm-hmm. It was a really good program. So I don't know. I cannot judge. I know there's a lot of not good stuff out there, but it's the same in Holland. I know there's probably a lot of good stuff out there as well. I just don't know.
There's great stuff. It's just, I'm talking from a structural standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
Something that's,
but you have to understand, we are the size of the half of Florida.
Yeah.
So, and there's 18 million people living in that small part. And our infrastructure is like, we can have with the national team, a centralized training like 2 times a week, because for the most people, it's just a half an hour drive. And if you're very far away, it's 90 minutes. So that's a huge advantage that we have.
I got you.
Yeah.
Now, if we can jump to a slightly different topic here, we're talking about sport-specific adaptations and then things we're doing outside of the actual sport in terms of our training practices, strength and conditioning stuff to actually improve these movement attractors. We talked about foot placement in the throw.
Yeah.
If you're saying, hey, we got a movement flaw in an athlete in regards to the foot placement, talk us through maybe some things you'd start to implement with these guys, because we've all seen, and I use it all the time still, we've all seen where, we may alter foot placement by, hey, this kid does not have the hip anatomy to have the foot placement that he's utilizing right now. And then we can start to implement some things. Hey, let's use some internal feedback. That's our number one thing that we see guys using is, okay, just step farther this way, step farther to the left. You're stepping too far to the right, step farther left. That's what guys always use. And, we use it from time to time here, but if you really look at it, how well does that transfer? And then you get guys out in the game where they're like,
they go back.
yeah, they're like, it's like totally jumbled up in their mind. So then we can use other things where we're like, let's put something on the floor, get them to step on this side of it. But then, like, what other tools do we have in our toolbox to start to work on some of that stuff?
Yeah. So first of all, is it a structural thing or not? So like if you need ankle stiffness, you need to train the ankle in stiffness. So like it's rope skipping or run ups or, all these stuff where like short ground contact times where you need to, because if it's it needs to be higher pace instead of low pace. That's how you train, let's say, ankle stiffness if somebody is collapsing through his ankle. But if his ankle is still very strong, but he's still in that motor pattern all the time, you have a different problem, right? So the toolbox of implicit learning is basically mirror neurons. You can use mirror neurons, so monkey see, monkey do. You use this in very young players. You got the differential learning or the chaos training, where you basically use create a lot of context towards the goal. So it's within the constraint-led approach, task, environment, and body. You change the overlap all the time, and you use that variation to let the body solve the problem itself. As an example, in that triangle, if you look at the environment, you can use different heights where somebody steps up or slope down, slope up, and then it's like, okay, if you walk onto a stairs, you have to plant your foot from above down. You cannot shift in. So every time you step onto something, but they're different heights, the body will learn it cannot do this anymore, but it has to do this. And that is in the triangle, of course, in the higher, lower, slope down, slope up, using that. So differential learning is a very fun thing to do, and it works really good. But it's, for a lot of people, it's an excuse to just do crazy stuff. But it has to be always.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
that's
it's a big problem. It has to be always in the context of what you want to accomplish. So it has to be contextual. You have to throw something at a target so you see if you hit the target or not while doing this stuff. Then you have blocked versus random training that you can use. You can use endpoint learning, which is very, very powerful. You can use forced environment and learning. You can use feed the mistake. That's a good example too. Like if the knee is collapsing in the load, use a TheraBand and pull the knee towards yourself. So you're actually trying to accomplish that the knee comes to you, and you just say, hey, I don't want the knee to come to me. So what they automatically do is they keep their knee stable and they go into their back hip. And once they go forward to throw the ball, you let loose of one side, and then they can just throw. So all these implicit learning tools, we're using them all the time. And depending on where somebody is in his learning curve, you use different ones. So if like the endpoint is not good, that's what you have to fix. The first thing you should fix is the endpoint, because if the body has no idea where it needs to go to get the result, then you have a big problem. So that's the most stable point in the movement should be the endpoint, or the first stable point.
This is even what we were talking about in the beginning, which is what you guys are doing over there is utilizing a lot of the same things that, we'll utilize here with different terminology. Like I can't remember what you referred to, like where you're pulling someone in the direction of the fault or facilitating the fault. What did you you call that?
Feeding the mistake.
Feeding the mistake. Yeah, we call it like error augmentation here. So like,
okay, yeah,
a lot of the and that's, I think, like a good thing actually for people learning a lot of this stuff from you guys being the innovators on a lot of this stuff, and the people that are bringing this stuff out to the masses, which is really necessary. Is it's going to require like extra diligence and careful attention when you are reading through the material and watching your stuff and reading your stuff online and listening to these, because like you call it feeding the mistake, and then people have to really think about it. When we talk about like some of these things, like do you ever find that you add like some form of proprioceptive input beyond that? Like we'll find ourselves utilizing mass or something like that just to stimulate some proprioceptors. Like, yeah, we have what we'd call like feeding the mistake, or endpoint learning we'd call like backwards chaining
chaining. Yeah.
So doing those sorts of things, but then like, okay, we're going to put a cuff weight on the ankle. We're going to add 2 pounds to the ankle so that you can really feel where your foot's at in space. But we get into an interesting thing there where once again, we can start to focus too much on the qualities of the motion rather than the end result. What are your thoughts in regards to some of that stuff?
I think that proprioceptive training, like you add resistant bands or you add stuff like you're saying now, can be really beneficial, but only in the beginning. Because in the end, I need to know myself where my body is in space, not because of a added thing. So if I'm pulling somebody forward, or if you're only using it in one direction, I don't think I think it could be way more beneficial if you use not only pulling somebody forward, but also pulling somebody backwards, and also pulling somebody sidewards, because then again you create context on the whole area instead of just one part of the area. And then again, like I said, in the beginning, to let somebody feel what he needs to do, yes, for sure, but then take it off because he needs to feel it himself and not because of the band.
Exactly. He's got to do it without the band in sport. He's got to do it in the contextual environment of playing on the field.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a phenomenal podcast. I'm actually hoping you'll come on again here in the future. There's so much we could talk about. Like, this conversation could go forever. So I want to thank you very much for coming on. I also want to thank you for spreading a lot of this knowledge, because this is stuff that a lot of people have never even heard of before.
Yeah, Max. Well, yes, sometimes it's hard to get the appointment going, but I'd love to have talks like this and reach out to a broader audience. It's awesome, and so they can always, if you're listening, you can always text me. If I think I know the answer, I will answer, and if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that I don't know. So I'm here to help and spread and what we believe in. Thank you very much.
where can people find you online?
On Twitter, for the most part. And I think it's Martijn, my name, Martijn Nijhoff.
Awesome. That's a for sure follow for anybody, because although like he's not always on there, when he's putting stuff on there, Martijn has some of the best stuff and best material. And there's a lot of other guys out there. But I know that you're doing some courses here, like at Florida Baseball Ranch. Are you planning to do any more symposiums or courses here in the U.S.?
Yeah, we're gonna do the summit again at Randy's on the 23rd and 24th of October. But we're also building a baseball course. Frans Bosch, Paul Venner, Bart Hanegraag, Randy Sullivan, and myself. And hopefully that will come out next year. It's a 3-stage course. So we start at the at the starting point.
Yeah, the very beginning.
And then we just build up, and it's going to be really cool. Yeah, specifically for baseball. Yeah,
we'll have to keep our eye out for that. Once again, thank you for coming on. I'm Max Wardell in the name of Overhead Athletics, signing off.